Hello, my name's Kat Hope and I'm the Artistic Director of Decibel New Music Ensemble, and I'm kind of here with Aaron Wyatt, member of Decibel Ensemble but also programmer of the Decibel Score Player and Score Creator. What we're going to do today is explain the Score Creator to you and the way that it works with the Decibel Score Player. The Decibel Score Creator is a free desktop application that you can download from our website and install on your desktop or laptop computer. And the aim of this software is to create a file format, the DSZ, which stands for the Decibel Score Zip, that you then upload into the Decibel Score Player to be read by your musicians. So when you're creating a score for the Decibel Score Player, currently there's two formats that can be made in the Score Creator. One is called the scrolling mode and the other one is called talking board. And you choose those here in the type. So the scrolling score basically means that the image scrolls past the line and people play at the line. The talking board model is a less linear idea where circles travel around the image and you read, or you decide actually how the musicians use the circles to interpret the image. They're the two modes in the Score Creator. So you'll need some things to put in the Score Creator. Of course, the first of those will be your score image. So the score image can be anything that you save as a JPEG or PNG. You can take a photo of something. You can create an image in a software package like Illustrator or Photoshop, any number of free software that you can use to manipulate images. It's really up to you. But I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about ways you can refine this image because you can either have a singular image that everybody reads as a group, but you might want to divide the image up into parts, because if you look at the Score Creator here, you can introduce parts. So the concept of parts is you have what might be thought of as a conductor score, and then you have different elements of the score, which are different instrumental parts. And in the Decibel Score Player, performers can choose to see all of the parts or their own part. So we're going to use an example of a piece of mine. This is called Her Pockets Full of Inertia, and it's in the Score Player. So when you download the Score Player to your iPad app, you can have a look at this score and see how it works. It's for a solo flute and flute choir. It's also got a playback audio component to it, which can be packaged into the score file, into the .dzz, and we'll talk about that a bit more later. So Aaron's showing us here the score. You can see it's a long score, and this is because it scrolls from left to right in the Score Player. But to introduce you to the concept of layers, you can actually choose to see just one of these parts instead of all of them using the layer function in Illustrator or Photoshop. So Aaron's going to show us just what the blue part on its own looks like. So you can present that as one part. You can save that as a part. And the best way to save it, Aaron, walk us through that?
Yeah, if I just go to File and then Export for Screens. And you'll be able to choose which artboards you want to export if you're using Illustrator. And you can choose the format here. So PNG is generally the one you'll want to use, or JPEG. And the numbers after the JPEG refer to the quality. So probably 100 or 80 is what you'd be after there, so that your image doesn't look blocky or compressed at all, and you don't get any compression artifacts.
Okay.
Yeah, so that'll do that. Also, so you can obviously export each individual part as a separate file. And rather than do it manually, there's a few, I'm just going to go to File, Scripts. There's a script that I'll make available on the Decibel website. It's currently on my website, so I can link to that anyway. But if I just find Documents and Export Parts. So this script will automate the process of doing that. So I can choose which of these I want to make into an individual part. If I have a layer, say there's a text layer on this that I might want in every part. So I can have that always showing on each part. And then there's this setting here for the background layers. So basically what this does is it takes each individual layer, highlights it at 100% opacity, and changes all of these other layers to whatever opacity you set here. So at 30%, they'll just be very faded off in the background. If you don't want to see them at all, you can just put 0% here and that will get rid of them entirely. The useful thing here as well is that, I'll just go back to 30. In selecting the output resolution, it shows you what the final image size is going to be. And for the score creator, for the image to look like it's at a good resolution, we're going to want this second number to be somewhere in the 1,000, around the 1,000 mark. So you can play with this until maybe slightly higher.
So seeing parts as opaque is a really good function if you want other musicians to see what each other are doing, which is in proportion scores is often quite important. So I find that really useful, especially when you have large groups of musicians.
Yeah. So this,
sorry, go on, Aaron.
This script just sort of automates that process and means you don't have to go through and manually choose layers and set the opacity each time and go through all that rigmarole. And it will ensure that all of the parts that are exported are at the exact same size, which is important for the score player. I mean, obviously, if you manually export them, they should come out at the same size if you're always exporting at the same resolution. Thanks, Java update. I'm going to skip you for now. They should
like me and my dean's meeting. We're both skipping.
True that. But as I said, this script just helps to automate the process and makes it a lot easier. So I'll make that available to people who want to.
That'll be on the Decibel website. So going back to the score creator, you've now seen how you might create parts. Don't forget, you might want to have a whole bunch of different photographs as parts. It's really up to you and your familiarity with different software. If you don't feel comfortable using programs like those, you can just put photographs. And the best way really is to make your score, put it in the score player and test it. The other thing that you can add to the score file is audio. And this really gets us into the conversation about proportion. So if you think about the score as a long file and it moving past this playhead you see on the screen, really, if you want things to go faster, you compress the image. If you want them to go slower, you extend it. The score player travels constantly at the same speed. And that's why that helps us embed audio into the score player. So you want your audio track to be the same length as your score player file. So if you want silence at the beginning, you should put that into your audio track, or silence at the end. But it's really important that it has the same length. So if you decide you want your piece to be 10 minutes, what I recommend you do is put your images into the score creator, upload them into the score player and test them, because in the score player you can change the tempo of the speed. So you can play a little bit until you decide what is the right speed for your piece, and then make your audio file to that exact length. And go on, Aaron.
The other useful thing as well is that the programs like Illustrator and Photoshop have grids that you can configure. So you can set up a grid. So say if you've got an image file that's 10,000 pixels long or however long, you can set a grid so that, and you want that to be 10 minutes long, you can set a grid to be displayed at every 1,000 pixels or even less, so that you have a mark every minute, or half of that for a mark every 30 seconds. And that can just help you to line things up with where audio events are going to occur in the audio file.
Yeah, one of the things I've done is I've put the audio file in the score file, played it, and then adjusted it on Illustrator and remade it. That's another way you can do it. Okay, so that gets us to the score creator and its function. So just to reiterate, the process here really is this is for the composing element, I guess. So this is making the score into the .dsz file that you then upload into the score player. The score player ships with some scores in it, as I mentioned before. The one we were looking at earlier is one of those. But to have your own piece in the score player, you need to make this DSZ file, which you can send to the ensemble to upload into their score player application. So going through the Score Creator, you just open it on your desktop and you will be presented with this screen. What you see on one side is the details that go into the screen, and on the other, a simulator, so you get an idea of what it looks like. Another thing you may want to prepare before you open this is your instructions file. So this is a file, a Word doc that you can then save as an image file, again, PNG or JPEG, and that just gives information to the performers about your piece and how to interpret it. It can include information such as what the purple color represents, what the thickness of the line represents, and so on. And there's examples of this in the score player that you can look at. But this is the moment where you bring all these files together so that they all come packaged into the score file. So think of the score file as what Simon Emerson calls a super score. It's got all this information in it, not just the information the musicians play, but the legend and the audio, which can be then played out of the mini jack of the iPad. Okay, we'll talk about how to get this score onto the iPad at the end of this tutorial. So as you can see here, it's quite, I think it's quite usable. So the score name is what will appear in the index of the score player when you're looking for a score. So you know, you can use whatever you want for that. Your composer, just your name. And when we look at the score player video, you'll see how they appear on the score player. You need to choose the type of score. So we've been talking mostly about scrolling scores at the moment, but of course the talking board score is a similar idea. It's just the way you read the image that's different, and the image will move around behind these circles, and we'll show you that in a moment. Duration. So duration is something that you set as the composer, but as I mentioned before, it's something that the ensemble can change once it's in the score player. But how I like to use this function of duration is this is the, you know, what the composer decides, and that any change is really for rehearsal purposes. So this is in seconds. So what Aaron's put there is a 10-minute piece. Would you like to talk us through start offset and playhead offset, Aaron?
Yeah, I think I might just load in an image file first because it makes it a bit easier to see exactly what these two things are doing when I change it around. So I'm just going to load just a test image, and this is one of Stewie's scores actually. It's Noise in the Clouds. So you can see there it's loaded into the Score Creator preview window. So you can't set it in motion as it will appear in the score player itself, but you can manually browse along to see how it's to get a feel of how it's gonna look. And you can also view that in both portrait and landscape modes. So you can see what it'll look like in either orientation of the iPad. So now that I've got an image in there to actually show what's going to happen when I change these two values, both of these only apply to scrolling scores. So the playhead offset, if I move this across, you'll see it sets where the playhead is going to appear on the iPad screen. The other thing that you can do is you can choose to express that as a percentage. So I could say I want it in the middle of the screen at 50% of the screen, and it will appear right smack bang in the middle. The advantage of the percentage is that if you're in portrait mode or landscape mode, it'll appear at that exact same screen ratio.
So the benefit of this is that it depends how much information you want your performers to see before they play it and after. So in this case, when it's hard on the left, like here, the performers are really looking quite far ahead. When you have it in the middle, they get less information to prepare. And if you have it right over on the side, like at an 80% offset, then they're going to get very little information before they play. So that's really up to you. I've used it in the middle when we've done experimental things with the score player where it moves in different directions. So it gives every, an equal opportunity to read. What about the start offset, Aaron?
So the start offset is useful if you've got a score file that has any sort of instructions in the left-hand margin. It basically sets what the left-hand margin is. So at the moment, this is where the score would start, and the composer is unlikely to want everyone to sit there doing nothing while it's sort of slowly scrolling past percussion 1 and clarinet and B flat here. So say if I want the score to start exactly at this line here, with the staves joined together. So if I want the score to start there, you can see down here in this area reserved for score play controls, there's this current position, 450. If I type in 450 here, that's now where this score will start. Also, if you just type in something blind here without checking it first, so say I wanted to start at 2000, this will jump to position 2000 to show you what it will look like in the score player. So that's where it'll start. Anything to the left of this won't be in the playable area. It'll just be considered to be part of the left margin.
So something worth thinking about as a composer when you look at this is bearing in mind that these instruments will disappear. So as the piece progresses, people won't know any longer. You know, you won't see this any longer. So that's just something to bear in mind, especially with text. If you want people to be engaging with text, you have to realize that once it disappears off the screen, they can't see it any longer. So if you ask, repeat this figure, quite often musicians don't know what figure to repeat once it moves off the screen.
And yeah, in something like this, it's not too bad because there's a limited number of staves, but if you had like 10 staves and someone was smack bang in the middle, it can be sometimes hard to keep track of that. So it's you know, some sort of you know, ongoing symbols or color coding can be very useful.
So moving on to our next, so we've got an image file in there, Aaron, and then you get an instructions file in the same way, you browse and add it in. And this will appear in a tab on the score file. So when you open it in the score player, the performers have the opportunity any time to go and refer to the instructions. Yeah. And the audio file, you access that in a similar way. You browse and choose whichever, where you choose it from your desktop. You can also choose the background color, Aaron. Now, do you want to talk us through this one?
Yes, I just wanted to say one thing about the instructions. So when you do choose an instructions file, you'll see this instructions button appear up here in a very similar way to the manner it'll appear in the score player. It just gives you the option. This is instructions for a totally different piece. It's just my test directory of random things to try out with the program when I'm adding new features. But you can see here, this image is just loaded in here, and you'll be able to see close to exactly what it's going to look like in score player.
So that's a really great way to see if however you saved your text document reads the way you'd like it to.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're seeing text, if it's too narrow or you're seeing text spill right out to the margins, it'll give you an idea of that.
Yeah.
So the background color, obviously not too big a deal for a score like this. But if you have a score that has, for example, a predominantly black background, got it, you might want to change this background color to black, especially because as the score reaches the end, you're going to see a whole lot of white appearing on the screen. So just changing that, and you'll see this is with a black background, how it'll look in the score player. And obviously you can change it to whatever color you want. Magenta is always a popular choice, or not. I'm just going to put it back to white to save my eyes.
Right.
And then parts here, once again, exactly the same way in which you put an image file in. You can add parts, and in this window you can actually select multiple parts. I don't think this score itself has parts, so I won't add anything there, but they'll appear here. And by just swiping up and down, so clicking the mouse button and swiping up, clicking the mouse button and swiping down.
Do you want to add some parts from Spaceply just so that we can see how that or whichever one?
Yeah, that won't really work because there'll be a different image size. I think there might be. Okay, I can do this one. Got it. Yeah, I will add these. So this is just. I'm just going to open this as the main. Oops, what happened there? Oops, I was loading the wrong thing. Scratch that. So I'm just going to load a new image. These are designed for a vertical score, so they're not going to look right here, but just to give you, they are the same image size, which is the important thing. So if I add another part here, you can see, oops, oh, there we go, that this will change between the parts. This was designed for a vertical scrolling score, so it just looks a bit naff like this, but
yeah, so the useful feature about this is that players can interchange between parts as the score is moving, which is something you can't test in the score creator, but you know, it's one of the things you might want to look at when you put it in.
The other thing worth mentioning as well is that the score creator does a lot of processing of images. So if your image is too big to fit in the score player, it will either shrink it down to size or tile it into multiple tiles. The other thing that's useful is if you have a score that's already been cut into equal width tiles, if you load one of these, the score creator will recognize that there are multiple images there, and it'll be able to load the complete tile set in. So most people won't have to deal with that unless you're dealing with multiple same-sized image files that you're using to tile together into a score. So that, I mean, it could be a useful way if you've got a series of photos of equal size that you want to just collate into a score. If you name them, as you saw there, with _1, _2, so on and so forth, the score creator will recognize those files and just import them all in for you. And I mean, you can't see any of the joins here, where some of the file joins are sort of in the middle of sections. So it just seamlessly adds them together.
Great. So you've got all the components. You've put in your image file, any parts. You don't have to have parts. You might just want to have a single image file, an audio file. You get a name component. The next thing you do is create the score, and it saves it to your desktop. Now, it's worthwhile noting that your computer won't be able to open this file. So if you send it to your performers, it will arrive on their desktop, but it's kind of not used. It can't be used on a computer, so it won't be able to be opened. So don't be alarmed if someone Dropboxes you a folder and it says we can't open it. It can only be opened on the iPad.
So I just reloaded Stu's score because this is an example of a particularly large score file. So when I hit the create button here, you'll see large image used. Would you like to have it automatically resized and tiled? The sensible, sane answer is always yes. It won't touch the original image file. So I'll just hit yes there. You'll see it take a little bit of time to do its thing while it's adjusting that image, and then it gives you the option to save it. It automatically adds the right extension, and usually it'll, well, not usually, it does use the score name as the file name. Obviously, you can change that if you want, but by default, it'll just do that for you. And
to get this file, your wonderful DSZ file, onto the score player itself, the best way is to use Airdrop. So you have to make sure that functionality is turned on to your iPad and your computer so that it will accept the files. And so for those of you who are not familiar, you choose your image. You can see it there on our screen, test.dsz. And at the top of the window, you have a Airdrop button. Do you want to just show us that one?
And you'll see my iPad's appeared there. If I just click on that, it'll ask me to accept that, and I can do that. And it'll appear
magically in your score player.
Yeah. Might be hard to see, but you can see test there.
Yeah.
There's our score.
So I hope this tutorial has been useful to you and gives you all the information you might ever need about making a score to go into the Decibel Score Player. We have another tutorial about how the score player works, but if you have any further questions about making your score, please contact Aaron. We'll be sharing his details with you, but there are a lot of resources on the Decibel website with the Decibel Score Player. We've got kind of different functionalities of the score player, and that's where you can download the Score Creator desktop app.